Hello, I'm Josh Lohman and welcome to Alaska Filmmakers, a series dedicated to exploring the many talented individuals in the Alaska film community. In this episode, we travel to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. This year marks the start of the university's bachelor degree program in film, a program that's been in development for the last several years. The program is headed up by Professor Maya Salganek, who has been teaching film and theater at the university since 2001. DK Johnston and AKF crew members Dan Lee and Mike Collier traveled to Fairbanks to learn more about Maya and the film program.
So we're here today with Maya from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Welcome. First things first, what introduced you to the film industry?
I started in children's theater when I was like 6, and I did children's theater all through my childhood and then into high school. And then I moved from doing theater into photography and visual arts, and worked into the visual arts for the next 10, 15 years or so, working in film, developing film and working in dark rooms. I did that both commercially as well as artistically, and worked in galleries, organized art shows. That moved into film festivals, and then it was sort of one thing kind of led to another in my photography work, where I kept doing these things where I'd be photographing something and there'd be this amazing sound happening simultaneously, and I kept trying to come up with these installation ideas of, like, you'd listen to the headphones and you'd see the photo on the wall, and a friend said, video? You ever heard of video? And I was like, oh, yeah, video is a good idea, you know? So I kind of moved into it because of my creative desires of what I wanted to do. And then it's just sort of blossomed.
Now, are you originally from Alaska?
No, I'm from New Mexico. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so that's where I was raised. And I went to the University of New Mexico, UNM, and got my degree there in media arts as well as photography. And anthropology actually as a minor, and then came here to Alaska, about 10 years ago. And I was imported, as we say, you know. So my husband brought me up, and just when I got up here, it was sort of the obvious thing, if I was going to live in Fairbanks, that I needed to work at the university, because I didn't really see another match for myself. So I started working here in various capacities, started working in the journalism department, at, you know, TAing and photography courses, and again, it was one thing after another, continued pursuing my career, and did freelance video work for a while, and worked on my master's degree bit by bit.
So what kind of productions have you worked on here in Fairbanks?
It's been a variety. I did work for the UPIC math program for a while, and we were basically working with UPIC elders and translating their knowledge of relationships, spatial orientation, numbers into mathematics curriculum. And so a lot of it I was filming and creating DVD content so that teachers would know how to implement this kind of curriculum in the classroom. So I worked with UPIC Math for a while. I worked for the school district doing promotional videos for their art projects. I worked for independent producers who were making projects, and they would be outside and call me, and I do, you know, research, cinematic research, photographic research, and so on. And then I started working on my own productions. I did a couple of my own productions up here, one called Games of Inuit and the other one Honoring the Gift. And both of them are about Alaska Native games. So I traveled around the state and learned more about Alaska Native games and made a couple films about that. And then in 2007, I was contacted to work with, by Tommy Hines, who was interested in shooting a feature up here, and ended up making that possible for him up here, and we shot the film Chronic Town, which then went to Sundance. It premiered in 2008 at Sundance. So that sort of started the engine of the feature films, and then I did another one in 2009. We did Deer Lemon Lima, and then last year we just finished producing Alaska Land.
Now, you said you worked kind of in both documentary and regular feature films. Which would you typically prefer, the documentary or the narrative?
You know, they're such different animals. They really are, and it goes back and forth. I also did a really big project for about 3 years. We were working with sea ice scientists working up in Barrow and on the sea ice, and I brought students up to Barrow, and we would shoot all these sea ice researchers, and it was all in conjunction with the International Polar Year. And the students got so much out of that, of just being on location and really trying to figure out, like, what is the story, and understand that, and how do we tell that in a visual way. I think that students, you know, I always have to look at it like, what do I like doing and what do my students get a lot out of, you know? And I think it's sort of a mix of the two, because creatively, in narrative film, you have, you know, every choice is your choice, you know, and you get to design and direct and construct the entire world. And that gives you a lot of tools to be able to decide what you're going to do. But the same is true when you get to just observe the world, and what do you show and what don't you show, and how do you find the right shot, and, you know, who do you talk to? They're just different pieces of the same puzzle for me.
So now, how did you get involved with the creation of the film major here at UAF?
When I got hired in, I was hired in as a temporary faculty member, part-time faculty member in 2007, and yeah, fall 2007. And at that time, we had a dean who was very interested in turning those minor degree programs into majors. So, turn the minor into a major for film. I kind of coalesced a group of faculty and interested parties on campus, and we looked at curriculum and tried to figure out, well, what would this program look like? And I always believed that we had the resources already here, and it was just a question of sort of structuring it and organizing it so that it made sense, so that we were offering classes in a structured way for a student to actually get a degree in film. And that was sort of my first stage approach. I was elected the chair of that committee and kind of penned a lot of the curriculum for the first roundabout, and then we would go over it, over the course of the year. And then in 2008, it sort of started to move through the system. We submitted it, and it takes, this paperwork route is a long route. You put it on paper and you say, okay, I think this is a good idea. I think we have the courses together, and how are we going to structure this program? And then it goes through, 15 committees. Everybody wants to look at it and tear it apart and figure out, is this really going to work? And so it made it all the way through the system, and its last stop was the Board of Regents. And it was sort of like, oh, it's at the Board of Regents. It's done. It's made it. But surprisingly to everyone, including like the provost and the president of the university at the time, Mark Hamilton, it didn't go forward. There were a bunch of proposals that were on the table that specific meeting. I think there were 12 new degree programs that were being requested for approval. And the board just said, tabled just about everything. That day, and so everyone took a big step back, and I think that was spring of 2009, I think, by the time it made it to the Board of Regents. And so we took a big step back and just sort of waited to see what would happen. The economy was tanking, there were a lot of variables, and it was understandable that the university didn't want to throw a bunch of money at a bunch of different programs without really understanding what they would look like. So we sat on it, and meanwhile, under the film department, we've had and have continued to have an emphasis in digital cinema, essentially. So we sort of kept bolstering that, and what were the programs within that part of the major that we already had, so you could have your theater major but sort of have an emphasis in film, and what would that look like? And we kind of kept working on that side of it. And the Board of Regents were here in December, December passed, and I just went to the meeting with a local DP and said, the film industry's here. The tax incentives are moving forward. They're making movies. They need people trained. The state has instituted, an incentive program for a reason, and we are the state institution. Like, we should be supporting our own state, And I just sort of put it to him saying, like, we can still do this. It's still possible. And within a couple of weeks after the holidays, the provost had called me and said, let's see the paperwork again. And so in a mad dash, we sort of restructured everything, because it had been written years ago now by the time it got back up. And so it was look at the numbers again, rehash what it would really cost us and what we really needed and who our allies were. And so called out for support, thank you, from the community at large. And it suddenly went through. And by February it was passed, and by April we were accredited. And by the end of April I had 19 majors registered and official on the books. So it's been a bit of a blurry year in terms of the speed of things, but it's a good start.
With the new film major, what kind of courses will be offered to students here at the university?
Yeah, we have a couple of new classes coming online. I'll be teaching a class called Pre-Production and Pre-Visualization for digital cinema. And so it's going to be everything from storyboarding to, actually screenwriting, storyboarding, and sort of the pre-production elements of what it would take to actually take a project off the ground. What we keep finding is students don't have that basic understanding of, the background of what you really need before you start rolling. So that'll be a requirement of all majors from here on forward. We have, I'll be teaching also another class in the spring called Cross-Cultural Cinema, which I think is really exciting, and I'll have a lot of people that I'll be working with as collaborators on that project, talking about, framework of film and how it works more in a documentary vein, but also just in creative. How do you tell stories that are culturally relevant to people in the North? I think it's a really interesting subject and something that we have a lot of room to explore up here. And Len Kammerling will definitely be a part of that, I hope, so that'll be great. And then other courses, students have an option to take either Let's Make a Movie, which is a narrative kind of structure. You work as a small studio group, and we produce a short film every semester. Or video storytelling, that's kind of 2 of 1 option. Video storytelling, similar but in documentary, and you're kind of the one-person crew doing everything from start to finish. Digital video editing is a requirement for our students. We have 6 credits required of different film studies courses. There's a lot of things that you can kind of mix and match, but we have a good, steady, stable requirement for the core of the major.
With some of the classes, some of the introductory classes, like you said, they kind of cover a broad range of filmmaking. Now, do some of those courses kind of tie in also with the general education here at UAF?
Yeah, our core requirements at the university are very, very specific, and we don't have a lot of room within the core to allow students to just dabble. So the core isn't, and the core is about to be revised at UAF. But right now the core is structured like these are the classes in the core and everyone's taking these classes and then you take your major. And it would be nice, I think, if you were able to like take this film class and let it apply to your core, because and it would be a feeder into a major. But right now that's not really the way it's structured. We do have within the course a certain number of like humanities credits. Well, all the film classes are humanities credits, so you can take a film class and it'll apply towards humanities. So we have that kind of latitude, but there's not a lot of that.
Now, looking at the faculty page online, I see that there's a lot of kind of cross-emphasis between like the literature department and the theater department, the journalism department. Is it nice to kind of have that crossover?
It's exciting because it is interdisciplinary, and film really is. You can't expect to be the one person to do everything. You can do that for a certain period of time, and then you kind of need more resources, And so being able to be cross-disciplinary and have people that are coming out of English and they're writers, and that's what they're doing, and they're writing for film and television, and that's really their emphasis, as well as being directors. There's some really nice fertilization there. We have another person out of our English department has been a film editor. So even though she's teaching the film studies courses, she was an editor previously. So we have a lot of these people that are kind of back and forth. And of course, journalism, they've got their own particular interests and needs in the film industry. And so do we in theater. We have costume shops and set designers. And we have a whole other set of resources within the theater department that they don't have in journalism or English. So I think together, it's going to be a really fun program. Of course, there are logistics of, we've had to figure out, well, where does the program live, And we're still a little spread out. And that's going to be the case for a while because we're just brand new. But we're centralizing, and we have, so long as the students know where to go to get the information they need and the students can find each other, I think that's going to be really important. And that's one of the cool things about having a major that we didn't have before, is that students were kind of spread out. They're like, yeah, I do film, but I'm in the journalism major. Or, yeah, I do film, and I'm writing, but I'm in English, And now they can find one another. And that's going to be, you've been to school, like your peers are what make school interesting. Faculty is great. We like having faculty. Facilities are important, but it's the peer units and the friendships that they're developing, the creative relationships that I really want to make sure that they have opportunities for. So that's going to be great.
Now, with some film schools, there's typically a core class, and then students move into emphasis like writing and directing. Is that how it's set up here at UAF?
Yeah, not at this point. Right now, it's pretty broad. We're not a film school, and any illusion that it's a film school is an illusion because we're a 4-year degree program. At film school, you don't have to take math. You don't have to go and take your chemistry class or your history of Alaskan culture. You don't have those core requirements. You go to art school, you go to film school, and that's what you're going to study. We're still general education. We're still a liberal arts degree program. So you're going to get all of the taste of all the rest of the requisite things that make you a whole person within the College of Liberal Arts, and at the same time, you're going to be focusing on film. And there just aren't enough credits. I think we're left with like 36 to 38 credits after you finish your core that's for your major. And after 4 years of school, that's only 2 years that you can really focus. And within that, though, you're able to kind of pick and choose. And again, now that this has moved forward, I think that there will be a period of time where the courses will get refined as faculty maybe gel into different positions. And as our department grows, as we get more students, we're going to need to have more specificity. And that's going to be something that we'll just grow into as it kind of dictates it. One of the things we definitely will be working on, and we have partners in the industry that we're working on this already, is offering more specific, deep line training programs that are industry specific rather than creative, you know. So we'll have a grip and electric course that will be brought in. You know, we're working with Katie Miller and Feature Alaska to try and bring in faculty members from outside to just do these 2-week intensive training courses. And we're going to hopefully roll that out next summer so that you can come in, take a 2-week intensive course in a very specific line item of the film industry that's in need, and then be out the door. And that'll be more of a certificate training program rather than the 4-year degree program. So that's yet to come. That's the next phase, is to get those certificate programs out. And then we'll be able to offer those courses wherever they are. If the shoot's going to be in Nome, we can offer them in Nome. They can be in Palmer, they can be in Anchorage, wherever we need to put them. And then if those students then, after getting the certificates, want to roll that into the 4-year program, they could do that and get their degree in film from UAF. So that's sort of, you know, maybe the 5-year plan of where we want to go with this.
So now you mentioned more of the focus now here is more of digital cinema. Now, having come up in kind of the production in the early 90s and kind of the older generation stuff, do you see a lot of difference between working with film and digital?
I don't really see that big of a difference. And it's more, you know, it's nice not being in the analog age, because that was a nightmare. To do everything linear was a nightmare, you know. So it's actually more like film that we're in non-linear now. You know, you can think in the same terms. If it's just like you're cutting up your negatives, you can cut up your sequences. And so I don't think that creatively there's that big of a difference. Just new techniques. And the only other thing that's really challenging about it is just keeping up with it, you know? So I think that's every filmmaker's concern, is you have to know the new technology and have access to it and understand how you're going to manage your data and what the medium looks like and how it's going to be compatible with something else, and you know, just stay on top of that part of it. So.
Now you talked a little bit about the future and plans for the film program here at UAF, but with the current incentive and the possibility of the extension, where do you see the future of the Alaska film community?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this next year, and if we do get another extension of the tax incentives, there's going to be a lot more activity, and the pace is just going to go up. You know, when all of this started for the university side of it, when I first started getting involved, there was no incentive program. Like, the incentive to me was like, let's make movies. That was the incentive, you know. That incentive's still there, but now there's some cash behind it that people are looking for, and some payback. You know, and that brings in the politics, right? So it's gotten much more complicated just in the last 3 years than I anticipated it would have been so quickly. But, you know, that's the real world. And so my hope is that we can continue to do actual live productions. I've had my students on all of my productions with me. And so they've worked as key grips. They've worked as, you know, production designers on feature films, you know, and these are like undergraduate students, you know. So being able to put them on a live set and have them working right away, I think is going to just be great. And so the more of that we can do, the more interns that we can put on sets, the more people that we can get hired in at the ground level, and get them prepared for whatever position they want to pursue down the road. I think that's just what we need to do. And then I think in terms of the state, I'm excited about what you're doing. I'm excited to hearing what everyone else is involved in, and how are we going to really collaborate and become good collaborators so that we have a great network and we know where people are and we know what they're doing, because it's a big state. It's a lot of ground to cover. And a lot of the work that people are coming in with, I mean, I've heard some crazy stories so far. I mean, people don't know how to make films up here yet, you know? I mean, there's significant challenges. And I think a lot of outside producers don't have that understanding yet. You know, they want it right here, right now, and they don't understand that there's no road to get there. You know, they're going to have to charter a plane, and there's just sort of those logistical things that we need to be able to be, as Alaskans, the guides, and really establish the throughway of how that's going to work. And that's going to, again, it's going to take time, and the incentive program will help us get there. And then the trick will be, when the incentives dry up, how do we keep that? You know, and how do we keep ourselves working and keep creating content and keep the networks in line, and, you know, keep work coming out. So that'll be the fun challenge in the next 20 years.
Just one last question. What kind of advice would you give to some of the young aspiring filmmakers here in the state?
Well, if there's an opportunity offered for you or towards you, jump on it. That's sort of the first thing, any opportunity. And you have to create those opportunities too. You just have to be bold and ask questions and be available, show up on time, have a good attitude, be a pleasure to work with. Those are all really critical. They're really critical. And then beyond that, choose wisely. Don't choose every project just because it shows up on your lap. There are some projects that, every project takes a little bit of your life's force away, and after a period of time, you got to be really wise about what you're choosing to invest your energy into. And so it's sort of that partnership of, be willing to go there and then know when you're looking for something else, and that's going to be an important piece of that too.
That's all the time we have today for Alaska Filmmakers. For more information about Maya or the film program at UAF, please visit our website at www.alaskafilmmakers.com. We'd like to give a special thanks to Maya and the University of Alaska Fairbanks for all of their hospitality, and to all of our sponsors and supporters for making this season of Alaska Filmmakers possible. Join us next week when we visit with Greg Kern of AK Grip and Lighting. Until then, remember, everyone has a story to tell.